Oh my Lord, this is the land lighted by the fire of thy love, and ablaze with the flame which is ignited in the tree of thy mercy, O my Lord. Increases in kindlement, heat and flame, with the fire which is kindled in the Sinai of thy manifestation. Verily, thou art the confirmer, the assister, the powerful, the generous, the loving. Oh my Lord, oh my Lord, this is the land lighted by the fire of thy love.
Liz and Dick, are you there? Goodness.
You're muted, Liz.
Liz, you are muted. Okay, I hit it twice, sorry. All right, good morning. We're going to read a few stories about the hands of the cause, Hand of the Cause, Dorothy Baker, and wonderful people who have come from Ohio or lived in Ohio or blessed Ohio. And there's so many. I prepared a list last night of all those beloved departed that we gathered yesterday, and we'll see it at the end. So Dorothy Baker was a young teen when she first met Abdu'l-Baha in 1912. She met Abdu'l-Baha because her grandmother, Ellen Beecher, known as Mother Beecher, was one of the first Baha'is in the U.S. When Abdu'l-Baha returned to the Holy Land, Dorothy wrote to him and received a reply. He said, "Oh, dearest child, I will pray that your great desire may be fulfilled and that you serve this cause." He told Mother Beecher that her granddaughter was his own daughter. Dorothy grew up and went on with her life, education, marriage, and several children. In 1927, she and her husband Frank moved to Lima, Ohio, and they resided there most of their lives afterwards. However, within a few years after that move, she was diagnosed with tuberculosis. Dorothy believed she only had a few months to live. With a sorrow-laden heart, she attended the 1929 National Baha'i Convention. A friend of hers, aware of her physical and emotional state, asked her if she was willing to leave this world without rendering some great service to the cause. Later that day, Dorothy described herself as a spiritual criminal, having lived uncommitted. Her remedy was to sit in prayer at the place where the Master had laid the cornerstone of the Mother Temple of the West, and pray with such fervor that she would later write of that time. The few minutes at the shrine will never be forgotten. How my throat ached. What those moments taught me, I cannot put into words. I think my heart was laid at the Master's feet. Immediately after this, Dorothy was called upon to address the convention as the granddaughter of Mother Beecher. It was her first large public address and the beginning of a lifetime of following the directive of the Master.
Speak, therefore, speak out with great courage at every meeting. When thou art about to begin thine address, turn first to Baha'u'llah and ask for the confirmations of the Holy Spirit. Then open thy lips and say whatever is suggested to thy heart. This, however, with the utmost courage, dignity, and conviction. It is my hope that from day to day your gatherings will grow and flourish, and that those who are seeking after truth will hearken therein to reasoned arguments and conclusive proofs. I am with you heart and soul at every meeting. Be sure of this.
Dorothy went onward and upward from there, seeming never to stop. She served the faith by addressing racism in America with Louis Gregory on the Race Unity Committee. She traveled many times to South America. She was a much beloved teenager. She was a much beloved speaker. Teenagers like our own Dallas Guffey, who is in the Abha Kingdom now, were delighted to brave the rigors of Lou Helen School when Dorothy Baker was the speaker. In 1951, she was appointed Hand of the Cause by Shoghi Effendi. She continued to travel. Her final trip in service to the cause was to India and Pakistan. At that time, in 1954, those regions were torn by war, religious, and political strife. On her way home, the plane exploded over the Mediterranean Sea. All aboard perished. Recovered from the wreckage was a passenger's handbag containing a Baha'i pamphlet, proof that Dorothy Baker was teaching the faith, spreading the divine fragrances to the last hours of her life.
I'm sorry.
Baha'u'llah has said a rose is beautiful in whatsoever garden it appears. All are one in the color and beauty of servitude to him. The Baha'i faith is divine in origin, all-embracing in scope, free from the insularities of the past. It inclines neither to east nor to west, to Jew nor to Gentile, to rich nor to poor, to black nor to white, to native nor to foreign born. It is a world community. Such a world community offers two distinct benefits. First, it gives to the entire planet that process of education which a prophet alone can bring to his age. And second, it offers a pattern for communal life which may well be the very foundation of a future society. For example, among the principles of Baha'u'llah is the principle of the oneness of mankind. A worldwide campaign in such an education may be said to be launched at this very hour by the Baha'is everywhere.
The following recollection of Javido Khadem, wife of the Hand of the Cause Zikrullah Khadem, describes part of a road trip she took with hand of the cause Dorothy Baker. We pick up the account with Dorothy driving the car while speaking. I had to do something that I forgot. I promised to pray for Elsie Austin because she wants to go to Africa and the door is closed. Will you help me? And I said, sure. I did not know what she wanted. She said, I want to say the remover of difficulties 95 times. Excuse me. She said it very slowly, and with each word, the tears poured down. She didn't even notice me. I looked at her. I had never experienced anything like this. The tears covered her face and dropped onto her clothes. I did not even count the number of prayers she said, but when she finished, she pulled the car over to the side of the road and passed out. I opened the car door and called, Dorothy, Dorothy, please. After about 10 minutes, she opened her eyes and was so happy. She said, I am sorry, honey, that I bothered you so much. I asked her, is this the way you always pray? She answered, is there any other way? Do you always say your prayers like that? Do you say your obligatory prayer every day like that? I asked. She said, did you ever read that you must wait to pray until you are feeling spiritual? Every morning I say many prayers so that I will be spiritual enough to say my obligatory prayer.
So this is our segue into Elsie Austin, who was able to go to Africa more than once. And we have a video of Elsie's speaking that we're going to show you.
Black women, elevating the Deltas to a new level of service.
I remember at this point how I became a Baha'i.
For Elsie, the mid-1930s was a time of spiritual introspection.
I was young, angry, incensed, and hostile. I went to my father and I said, I'm going to become an agnostic or an atheist because I just don't believe anymore in these religions that are all separate, all fighting with each other, all enforcing prejudice against some group. And yet they say God is the father of all mankind. My father heard me out and then said, well, before you do it, why don't you go and talk to these Cincinnati people who are talking about the Baha'i faith? He was not a Baha'i, but he said they have some very interesting views, and maybe that will interest you. So I went and talked to the Baha'is. I took their literature around for 2 years to find things to argue about. And my confirming experiences were the activities and the attitudes of so many wonderful Baha'is who helped me overcome my bitterness. There was Mr. Lewis Grayberry, who taught classes about the faith with culture, with gentility and forcefulness that impressed everybody. There was Dorothy Baker in Lima, an atmosphere which was like a setting for the Ku Klux Klan, so rigid and so mean. But Dorothy Baker opened her home for Baha'i firesides, to which came black and white inquirers from surrounding areas who listened and became attracted to the teachings.
Elsie found that the teachings of the Baha'i faith were consistent with her deep desire to contribute to the well-being of humanity. Dr. Austin shared her thoughts on this subject in an article, stating, "The religion of Baha'u'llah, founder of the Baha'i faith, begins with that essential spiritual regeneration of the human being, which creates a heart for brotherhood and impels action for the unity of mankind. Elsie became a member of the Baha'i faith in 1934, and just 12 years later was elected to the 9-member national governing body. In 1953, she moved to Tangier, Morocco, to help establish the first Baha'i community in that country and to assist in the spread of the Baha'i faith throughout northern and western Africa. In 1960, Dr. Austin joined the U.S. Foreign Service and served 10 years in Africa as a cultural attaché with the U.S. Information Agency. She initiated the first USIA women's programs on that continent, working with leaders and organizations in 13 African countries. As a result of those efforts, the USIA nominated Dr. Austin for the Federal Women's Award, and the University of Cincinnati gave her an honorary doctorate of humanities degree in 1969. In 2000, the university named a scholarship in her honor. Her outstanding story of service, spirit, and faith will undoubtedly inspire future generations to excel, succeed, and serve for years to come.
The essential for peace is unity of conscience. Why? Because unity of conscience makes us willing to be just, to give the other fellow his due. And I hope we will continue to work with all the inward and outward obstacles in developing that unity of conscience in ourselves and in all we can touch. The time for transformation is now. I think there is a Baha'i prayer that can offer us guidance, strength, and determination. It is the prayer which talks about protest, it talks about faith, and it talks about progress. And it goes, quote, "O God, aid thy servants to raise up the word, to refute what is vain and false, to establish the truth, to spread the sacred verses abroad, and to make the morning's light to dawn in the hearts of the righteous." And I don't know what we're waiting for, but we should be galvanized into action, because now is the time, as the saying goes, if not now, when?
Shine ye like unto the sun, and roar and move like unto the sea. Shine ye like unto the sun, and roar and move like unto the sea. The sea, the sea, the sea. Impart life to mountain and desert like unto clouds, and similar to the vernal breeze, bestow freshness, grace, and elegance. Shine ye like unto the sun, and roar and move like unto the sea. Shine ye like unto the sun, and roar and move like unto the sea. Bestow freshness, grace, and elegance on the trees of human temples. Freshness on the trees of human temples. Shine ye like unto the sun, and roar and move like unto the sea. Shine ye like unto the sun, and roar and move like unto the sea.
Camilla, you're muted.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so one of Ohio's greatest honors is Abdu'l-Baha's visit to two of Ohio's cities, Cleveland and Cincinnati. And while in Cleveland, he uttered these potent words in one of his public addresses. The American continent gives signs and evidences of very great advancement. Its future is even more promising, for its influence and illumination are far-reaching, and it will lead all nations spiritually. So we've shared a glimpse of Ohio's earliest teachers and have been touched by their great love for Baha'u'llah and his faith. And there are many more stories to be told. Mary Martin, Sarah Pereira, and Olivia Kelsey, to name a few. And we encourage you to study those early believers' lives and call on them for assistance. So we're going to close with some words on teaching spoken at the Baha'i World Congress by Ruhiya Khanum.
We had another Baha'i here in New York City, and I'm very glad to mention her. Her name was Carrie Marsh, and she was small and stocky and tough and muscular. And her profession was to have a little tiny suitcase. And she went around to all the big dry goods stores here in New York. Of course, it was much more, well, let's say, less rigidly controlled and security and God knows what that we have today. And she used to go around with this little suitcase to the different counters. And she would open her suitcase, and it had safety pins and needles and thread and perhaps some aspirin tablets and things like that, notions. And she'd sell it to the serving girls who used to get off their work in New York after everything was closed. At very long hours in those days. And then she would teach them the Baha'i faith. And Carrie Marsh, I was very afraid of her because she knew my mother. She's a great friend of my mother. And I was about 8 years old at that time, and she was very strong. And every time she came to see my mother, she'd hug and kiss me and almost break my ribs. So I was really quite timid about getting hugged by Carrie. But that woman, and I think that these are things that are good to remember. So help me God, Carrie Marsh could have sat next to a university professor at a dinner party and talked to him about the Baha'i faith on about the same level of comprehension as another university professor that was a Baha'i might have done. She knew the cause of God that well. And I think we have to remember that knowing the cause
least of all serving it and dying for it, is not confined to a university degree. It's not confined to being literate. It's confined to how much understanding and love you have in your heart and how much common sense and wisdom you have in your head. There's no monopoly on it.
So friends, we'll turn the program back over to Louis and Jason.
Thank you so much. I think really for a beautiful beginning to our gathering today and also for yesterday's program, Jackie, Camilla, and Marianne, thank you so much. And to all the friends who contributed by reading or singing or sharing in some way.